The night Emily signed the divorce papers, rain hammered the city like it was trying to wash her sins into the gutter. Noah didn't see the storm. He was inside it. He stood in their half-empty apartment, staring at the ink she'd pressed onto the page, as if her signature had carved a hole straight through his chest. His uniform was still dusty from deployment, his wedding ring still warm on his finger. But the home he fought to return to was gone, stripped of photos, stripped of laughter, stripped of her. Then his phone buzzed. A notification from her public post, the one she hadn't meant for him to see. New beginnings, finally choosing myself. And beside her, the man she'd left him for, a smile like victory carved on his face. Noah sank to the floor, breath shaking, realizing the war he survived wasn't the one that destroyed him. The one that did was her. By the time Noah Reeves realized the key felt wrong in his hand, the sun had already slipped behind the Jersey skyline, smearing the windows with a tired orange glow. The metal was the same scratched brass it had always been, but his fingers were shaking so badly from the long flight and the jittery, stale coffee that he missed the lock twice before it slid in. The hallway of their apartment building smelled like boiled cabbage and old carpet cleaner. It was familiar, almost comforting. The way the army duffel bit into his shoulder was familiar. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Home. He turned the knob and pushed the door open, expecting the faint vanilla of Emily's candles, the TV low in the background, the mess she always promised to clean up and never quite did. Maybe she'd be half asleep on the couch, a blanket over her legs, laptop open with 100 tabs and a half-written email glowing on the screen. The silence met him first. Not soft, not peaceful, just blank. "No, Em?" he called, forcing his voice into an easy grin she wasn't there to see. "Thought you'd at least pretend to miss me." His laugh died halfway out. The apartment looked wrong. The cheap rug they'd bought from IKEA, the one she swore she would replace once they made it, was gone, leaving lighter patches on the worn hardwood. The gallery wall of mismatched frames that Emily had obsessed over for days, photos of their wedding, blurry selfies, the Polaroid of him in uniform before his first deployment, was stripped bare. Just faint rectangles and a couple of crooked nails remained. Noah dropped his duffel with a dull thud. "Emily?" The kitchen answered him with a faint hum from the refrigerator. The clock over the stove ticked too loudly. The chair by the window was still there, but the throw she loved, the yellow one she'd dragged from store to find, was missing. He moved further in, the weight of the room shifting with every step. There was something on the counter. At first, he thought it was just the usual pile of unopened mail. Then, he saw the manila envelope, centered neatly like a place setting. His name was written on it in Emily's careful, almost childish handwriting. Noah. The letters blurred for a moment. He blinked hard and reached for it. The paper was cool, too stiff, like someone else's life. He told himself it was nothing. A surprise, maybe. Plane tickets. Some silly Pinterest date idea she'd finally decided to try. She'd always wanted to be dramatic, to make moments cinematic. His gut twisted. He opened the envelope. The first thing he saw was the seal of the state of New Jersey. The second was the word divorce in a block of unforgiving legal text. For a second, everything inside him went absolutely still. It was like being back in the desert, that half second when the world holds its breath just before an explosion. Noah lowered himself into the nearest chair because his knees didn't feel solid anymore. The chair scraped the floor in a screech that sounded too loud in the empty apartment. He scanned the first paragraph, then the second, but his brain snagged only on certain words. Irreconcilable differences. Petitioner. Emily Carter Reeves. Respondent, Noah James Reeves. There was a note clipped to the top, a scrap of lined notebook paper, the kind she used to write grocery lists on. I'm sorry, Noah. I can't live like this anymore. Always waiting, always scared, always broke. You deserve someone stronger, and I can't keep pretending I'm okay. This is better for both of us. Please sign. Emily. There was a faint smudge near her name, where the ink had bled a little. Tear or spilled coffee, he couldn't tell. His first instinct was denial so sharp it almost felt like hope. This had to be a mistake, a bad joke. They'd argued before he left, sure, about money, about him re-enlisting, about how many times she'd had to sleep alone while her friends posted couples' photos from rooftop bars. But this? He pictured her face. The way she'd refused to meet his eyes during that last FaceTime call 2 weeks ago, saying she was just tired. The way her phone had buzzed off screen, and she'd muted herself, smiling at someone she never turned the camera toward. Noah's eyes flicked around the room, seeing now what he hadn't let himself see when he first walked in. The bookshelf was half empty. Her favorite mugs were gone. The tiny cactus she'd babied for months, complaining it was too dramatic for a plant, had vanished from the windowsill. He stood up so fast the chair tipped, then steadied with a crack against the wall. He stormed into the bedroom. Her side of the closet was almost bare. No bursts of color from her dresses, no jumble of shoes, just a lone hanger swinging slightly, as if it had only just been disturbed. The top drawer of the dresser, where she kept her jewelry and tangled headphones, was open and empty. On the nightstand lay a single object, the framed wedding photo that had been on their wall. He picked it up. The glass was gone, the frame itself chipped, as if she'd pulled it down in a hurry. In the photo, Emily was leaning into him, laughing, eyes crinkled, bouquet tilted. He remembered the weight of her hand in his that day, the way she'd whispered, "Promise me you'll always come home." He had, again and again, through dust storms and gunfire and nights that smelled like diesel and fear. He had. Noah sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress exhaling a tired sigh beneath him. His boots left dust on the comforter she'd picked out. He looked at the photo until the image blurred, then turned it face down. The thud was softer than he wanted it to be. On the dresser, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out. No new messages from Emily. The last text from her was 3 days old. "Sorry, busy, talk later." He scrolled up, searching for some clue, some moment where she'd said, "I'm leaving. I met someone." Instead, he found his own words, desperate and earnest. "I miss you. I'll be home soon. We'll figure this out. I promise." The phone buzzed again. This time, a notification from Instagram. A friend had tagged him in a post. "Proud of this guy? Can't wait till you're back, brother." He swiped it away, and a thumbnail lingered for a heartbeat too long. A photo Emily had posted earlier that evening. He tapped it before he could stop himself. There she was, lit by warm restaurant lights, hair curled perfectly, makeup done in a way she'd never bothered with on their cramped couch. She was wearing a sleek black dress he'd never seen before. Next to her, a man in a tailored suit had his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, fingers spread like ownership. The caption read, "New beginnings, finally choosing myself." Noah stared at the man's face. Square jaw, lazy confidence. Watch that probably cost more than Noah's car. Victor Hale. He recognized the name from passing comments Emily had made. "My big client. He's intense but brilliant. If this campaign goes well, it could change everything." His stomach dropped so fast he felt sick. He threw the phone onto the bed. It bounced once and landed face down, mercifully blank, but the image burned behind his eyes anyway. For a long time, Noah just sat there, elbows on his knees, hands locked behind his neck. The apartment ticked and hummed around him, the fridge cycling on, a car horn blaring distantly outside. Ordinary sounds in a life that had just been split open. Somewhere, under the roaring in his ears, a voice whispered that this was his fault. He had chosen the army. He had chosen deployment after deployment. He had chosen duty over dinners, over birthdays, over lazy Sundays in bed. What did he expect? That love alone could compete with fear and rent and the relentless scrolling pressure of everyone else's perfect lives. He wanted to scream. Instead, he forced himself to stand, walked back to the kitchen, and picked up the divorce papers again. His hands had steadied. Something inside him had gone very, very still. He pulled a pen from the drawer, uncapped it, and hovered over the signature line. For a moment, he saw their entire relationship flicker in front of him like a badly cut movie montage, laughing over burnt pancakes, dancing in the living room, fighting over bills, kissing in airport parking lots with the smell of jet fuel in the air. "You wanted cinematic, Em," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "Here it is." Then, without trusting himself to think any further, Noah Reeves lowered the pen and signed his name, pressing hard enough to nearly tear through the paper. He didn't feel better. He didn't feel anything at all. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere in the city, then faded. Inside, the ink dried quietly on the page, marking the moment everything that had been us became just him. And for the first time since he'd stepped into the apartment, the soldier who had always found a way to survive suddenly didn't know who he was supposed to be anymore. Emily Carter had always believed silence was a luxury, something found in penthouses overlooking Manhattan, not in cramped apartments with thin walls and neighbors who fought at 2 a.m. Yet now, as she stood barefoot on the marble floor of Victor Hale's 47th story residence, the silence around her felt less like luxury and more like suffocation. The city glittered beneath her, a swarm of lights in motion, but inside the glass-walled living room, everything was too still, too curated, too breakable. Even her reflection on the window, perfect hair, perfect dress, perfect posture, felt like someone else's life projected onto her skin. She should have felt victorious. She should have felt chosen. Instead, her throat was tight as she scrolled through her own Instagram post again. New beginnings. Finally, choosing myself. The comments flooded with praise emojis, heart icons, and "so proud of you" messages from acquaintances who didn't know anything about her except the filtered slivers she allowed them to see. But beneath her caption, beneath the flawless smile in the photo, something tremored, a crack invisible to everyone but her. Behind her, the elevator door slid open with a soft chime. Victor stepped inside the penthouse, phone still pressed to his ear. He didn't acknowledge her right away. He rarely did when business hovered around him like a second skin. He tossed his coat onto the couch without looking, voice sharp as polished steel. "No, that's not acceptable. I don't care what legal says. Fix it." Emily turned from the window, smoothing the silk fabric of her dress. The motion felt automatic, like muscle memory learned from trying too hard. She waited. Not because he demanded it, though he often did, but because interrupting him mid-call had once resulted in a 30-minute cold silence that left her crying in the bathroom with the faucet running. Victor finally hung up and exhaled sharply. Crisis after crisis. I swear people are incompetent. Only then did he glance at her. "You're home early." "I finished the presentation faster than expected," she said softly. He nodded, already moving toward the wine bar. "You rehearsed the talking points I gave you?" She hesitated. "I changed a few things. The tone felt too aggressive." Victor poured himself a drink, ignoring her uncertainty. Aggressive gets results. He sipped, then looked her over, the way one might appraise art rather than acknowledge a person. You posted the photo I told you to? Her chest tightened. Yes. Good. Optics matter. He handed her a glass of wine she hadn't asked for. You look tired. I'm fine. Don't let yourself go, he said lightly, as though discussing the weather. We have the Hale Foundation Gala coming up. Press will be everywhere. Emily swallowed the retort rising in her throat. She remembered when compliments from Victor had thrilled her. The attention, the rooms she suddenly had access to, the feeling of being seen, valued. Back when he had leaned across a glossy conference table and told her she deserved more than a life spent waiting for a man who might never come home. She had believed him. God, she had believed him. But now, in the quiet of this towering glass box, she felt more like an accessory he polished when needed and stored away when he didn't. Her phone buzzed. Another notification. Another comment on the photo. She turned it face down. Victor settled onto the couch, turning on the muted news. Come here, he said, not unkindly, but not lovingly either, more like someone calling a pet. Emily obeyed and sat beside him. His hand rested on her knee. Light, casual, claiming. A familiar chill slid down her spine. She tried to focus on the news anchor's voice, a headline about a veterans organization expanding to Texas. A face flashed on screen for a moment. A man training other vets at an outdoor gym. The clip was brief, just a few seconds, but her breath caught anyway. It wasn't him, not Noah, but it could have been. The anchor continued. Grassroots movement started by a former Army sergeant. The rest blurred. Her chest tightened painfully. She had spent weeks convincing herself that Noah would move on quickly, that someone like him, with his loyalty and quiet steadiness, would find a woman who fit better into his world. She convinced herself his heartache wouldn't last, that he'd see the divorce as a release. But that lie was unraveling. She felt it every night when she lay awake beside Victor, staring at the ceiling and listening to a heartbeat that didn't comfort her. Victor's fingers squeezed her knee. You're distracted. I'm just tired, she whispered. You said that already. His voice was calm but edged. If you're unhappy, it makes me look like I'm not taking care of you. Her breath hitched. I didn't mean... He kissed her temple, an affectionate gesture that felt more like correction than comfort. Be better tomorrow. Be better. She nodded, eyes burning. Later that night, while Victor slept beside her in the dimly lit bedroom, Emily slipped out of bed and stood near the window again. The city murmured below, a distant, unreachable hum. She opened her phone. Her finger hovered over Noah's contact, deleted weeks ago in a blaze of guilt and determination. But old habits lingered in the cloud. The search bar filled his name automatically. No new posts. He rarely used social media, but she scrolled through their old messages anyway, rereading his last one. We'll figure this out. I promise. Emily sank onto the cold floor, hand trembling over her mouth to keep the sob quiet. She had walked into this life for stability, safety, success. She had walked away from love, messy, imperfect, real love, believing she could replace it. But all she had now was a cage with a stunning view. She pressed her forehead to her knees, tears slipping down her cheeks. This is what you chose, she whispered to herself, and you can't undo it. Yet even as she said it, the truth lodged painfully in her chest. Every day, the life she chose felt less like a choice, and more like a sentence. The motel room smelled like bleach and stale cigarette smoke, an odor so sharp it cut through the fog in Noah's head. He stared at the ceiling, its texture a cracked constellation above him, while the slow throb of a hangover pulsed behind his eyes. Morning light pushed through the cheap curtains, exposing the battlefield of empty bottles scattered on the nightstand. Bourbon, vodka. Whatever he'd bought at the convenience store after midnight, when the weight in his chest felt too heavy to carry alone. His throat was dry, metallic. His mouth tasted like regret. Somewhere, a car alarm wailed. Someone in the next room coughed. The world moved on. But Noah Reeves lay there, numb. Still deployed in a war no one could see. He lifted a hand to his face. His knuckles were scraped, fresh bruises blooming across them like ugly purple flowers. Memories flickered. A bar, loud voices, someone shoving him shoving back. A punch thrown. Another. A bouncer dragging him outside. He exhaled slowly. He was losing control. The knock came softly at first, then harder. "Noah, you alive in there?" He closed his eyes. Lucas. Of all the people he didn't want to see, Lucas Hartman, the only guy from his last unit still keeping tabs on him, was at the top of the list. "Noah, man," another knock. "Open up before I break in and get us both arrested." With a groan, Noah forced himself upright. Every muscle protested. His feet felt heavy against the carpet as he dragged himself to the door and cracked it open. Lucas took one look inside and let out a low whistle. "Damn. Looks like you tried to drink the entire state of New Jersey." "Feels like it," Noah muttered. Lucas pushed past him, heading straight for the bottles. "What is this? Some kind of world record attempt?" "Just leave it," Noah muttered. "Please." Lucas ignored him. With a sigh, he began tossing bottles into the trash can, the clinking glass loud and accusing. "I've been calling you for days. You ignoring me was one thing. You getting tossed out of Murphy's bar last night? Whole different problem. You talked to Murphy?" "He talked to me. Said you looked like you were trying to take on 3 guys at once." "2. "Congratulations. That makes it so much better." Noah rubbed his eyes, resentment simmering beneath the exhaustion. "I don't need a babysitter." "Well, you clearly need something," Lucas shot back. "Because this is not it." Noah turned away, pacing the small room. "I signed the papers, man." His voice cracked despite his efforts. "I came home and found divorce papers like they were a damn grocery list. And she's with someone else. Rich, stable, everything I'm not." Lucas's shoulders softened. He sat on the edge of the bed. "I know. I'm sorry." "No, you don't know." Noah stopped pacing. "It's like everything I held on to during deployment, every reason I kept going, was just a story I told myself. And now the story's gone." Lucas let that hang in the air. After a moment, he spoke quietly. "You're allowed to fall apart. You just can't stay there." Noah blinked at him. Lucas continued, voice steadier now. "You remember what you told me in Afghanistan, when Peterson froze up during that ambush?" Noah frowned. "That was different. You said," Lucas pointed a finger at him, "surviving isn't about being fearless. It's about moving anyway. You said that." Noah stared at the floor, anger and grief tangling inside him. "I don't even know how to move anymore." "Then let someone help you." Lucas reached into his jacket and tossed a folded pamphlet onto the bed. Veterans Peer Support Circle, Weekly Meetings, Newark, VA. Noah let out a humorless laugh. "Group therapy? Really? You think you're the only one drowning?" Lucas snapped. "Half the guys from our unit are struggling. Some worse than you." His voice dropped. "You miss one more meeting, and I'm dragging you there myself." The fight drained out of Noah. He dropped onto the chair, head in his hands. He hadn't realized until that moment how tired he truly was. Not just the physical exhaustion, something deeper. Bone deep. Soul deep. Lucas stood. "Meeting's at 6. I'll pick you up." "No." 6, Lucas repeated, already moving to the door. "Wear something that doesn't smell like despair." The door shut behind him. Silence settled again, but this time it felt different. Heavier, expectant. Noah looked around the room. The mess, the empty bottles, the wreckage of who he'd been in the weeks since Emily left. He imagined her in some penthouse with the man from the photo, smiling the way she used to smile at him. A familiar pain stabbed through his chest, but beneath it, something else stirred, a tiny pulse of defiance. He wasn't dead yet. He wasn't done. That evening, when Lucas knocked again, Noah opened the door. He'd showered, shaved, put on clean clothes. His hands still trembled slightly, but he ignored it. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Look at you. Almost human." "Shut up." Lucas grinned. "Let's go." The VA building smelled like coffee and old books. In a small circle of mismatched chairs, 5 other veterans sat waiting. Some older, some younger, all carrying something behind their eyes. Noah hesitated at the doorway. Lucas nudged him forward. "You belong here too." He took a seat. The group leader, a soft-spoken woman with silver streaks in her hair, smiled gently. "We're glad you're here, Noah." He didn't know if he believed her, but as the session began, and each person shared pieces of their own battles, war stories, nightmares, divorces, addictions, something in him loosened. He wasn't the only one haunted. He wasn't the only one hurt. And for the first time since returning home, Noah felt a flicker of something he thought he'd lost forever. A beginning, a direction, a fragile thread of hope. He didn't know where it would lead, but he knew one thing. He didn't want to die in that motel room, not like this. And maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward becoming someone he could live with again. The Texas heat felt different, less like an attack, more like a reminder that the world kept moving whether he was ready or not. When Noah stepped out of the bus station in Austin, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, he breathed in the warm, dry air, as if it might scrub the remnants of New Jersey from his lungs. It didn't. But it didn't choke him either. That was something. He had nothing extravagant waiting for him. Just a modest sublet arranged through a friend of Lucas's and a stack of paperwork for his GI Bill enrollment at the local university. The plan felt shaky, improvised, surreal. The last time he'd been a student was before enlistment, before sandstorms and night patrols and the hollow look in a soldier's eyes when they learned someone back home had stopped waiting for them. But the alternative had been a motel room and an empty bottle. He'd already tried that version of life. It nearly finished him. The apartment he moved into wasn't much. Peeling paint, mismatched furniture, a view of a parking lot. But it was quiet. No ghosts in the walls, no memories pressed into the pillow beside him. That first night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, its blades spinning in slow, lazy arcs. He wondered what Emily was doing, whether she ever lay awake, whether she ever thought of him at all. The thought stung, but it didn't collapse him like before. Pain, he was learning, had gradients. The next morning, he began again. College at 28 made him feel both too old and too young. His kinesiology classes were filled with bright-eyed undergrads taking notes on color-coded tablets. Noah showed up with a second-hand laptop and a determined silence. He found a seat in the back of every classroom, listened more than he spoke. He didn't know if he belonged, but he stayed. Between classes, he worked part-time at a crowded gym near the university. The owner, a retired Marine with a broken nose and a grin that made strangers nervous, hired him within 10 minutes. "You work hard, you show up on time, and you don't act like a jerk," the man said. "That's it. That's the job." It was simple enough. Noah kept his head down, cleaned equipment, helped clients adjust their form, learned the rhythm of the place. There was something grounding about it, repetitive tasks that didn't crumble under the weight of what-ifs. In spare moments, he jogged the city's lakeside trails. The slap of his shoes against the pavement was steadying, almost meditative. He still woke some nights gasping, sweat clinging to his skin. Still fought the instinct to scroll old photos of Emily. Still felt the phantom pressure of wedding bands on a finger that was now bare. Healing wasn't linear, but it was moving. One Tuesday afternoon, as he was locking up dumbbells, he overheard two young vets at the gym talking about anxiety attacks and being dismissed by their families. They laughed it off, the way soldiers do when pain becomes a shared language. Without thinking, Noah stepped toward them. "You ever tried grounding exercises?" he asked. Both turned, surprised. He showed them breathing methods, tricks he'd learned in therapy. A few stretches that relieved tension locked in the spine. Within minutes, the conversation expanded. Another vet approached, then one more. They talked for nearly an hour about panic spirals, nightmares, deployment memories that cropped up while waiting in line at the grocery store. Noah shared what he could, not as a teacher, not as anything official, just as someone who understood. The next day, 3 of them returned, then 5, then 10. Noah didn't plan any of it, yet somehow, every evening at the same time, a small cluster of veterans gathered behind the gym near a set of metal benches, sharing stories and doing improvised workouts together. Someone recorded a short clip one day, Noah kneeling beside a trembling younger vet, coaching him quietly through a breathing exercise. The caption read, "This man saved my friend today." The video spread, first among local vets, then on TikTok, then through Instagram Reels. Suddenly, strangers were showing up. Local news requested an interview. People donated equipment. Someone offered space at a park free of charge. One evening, as Noah adjusted a resistance band for a woman missing part of her left leg, a reporter approached with a microphone. "Are you the founder?" she asked. He froze. Founder? Him? This wasn't a plan. It wasn't even a concept. "It's just vets helping vets, Balta," he said. She smiled. "Then you're exactly what people need to hear about." The piece aired 2 nights later. Noah didn't watch it, but everyone else seemed to. His inbox filled with messages, strangers thanking him, soldiers asking for advice, people sharing their own quiet battles. For the first time in years, Noah felt something like purpose weaving itself back into his bones, not the kind sewn by medals or missions. Something quieter, something gentler, something his own. A month later, the gym owner slapped paperwork onto his workstation. "What's this?" Noah asked. "A chance," the man said. "People want you to turn this into something real, a foundation, a program, whatever you want to call it." Noah stared at the folder, at his name printed on the top page. His throat tightened. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't a visionary. He was barely a man trying to stay afloat. But he thought of the trembling hands he'd held, the haunted eyes he'd looked into, the weight he'd helped carry, not alone, but together. Maybe he could be something more. Maybe he already was. He exhaled slowly, a breath that seemed to untangle 100 knots inside him. "Okay," he whispered. "Let's build it." And there it was, the first step toward the man he was becoming. A man Emily wouldn't recognize anymore. A man he wasn't sure he recognized either. But for the first time, he wanted to. The first sign wasn't loud. It never is. It was a silence, subtle, controlled, calculated, like the moment before a blade touches skin. Emily noticed it during a dinner at Aurelia, one of those Michelin-starred restaurants lit so dimly the guests felt both flattered and exposed. Victor sat across from her. Perfect posture, perfect suit, perfect smile reserved for the investors joining them later. To everyone else in the room, he was power sculpted into human form. To Emily, he was becoming a stranger with familiar hands. The waiter poured wine she didn't like. Victor didn't look up from his phone as he said, "She'll have Chardonnay. She doesn't do well with reds." Emily blinked. Since when? She opened her mouth to correct him and felt the quiet warning in the tilt of his eyebrow. So she nodded, and she sipped a wine she didn't enjoy, and she stayed quiet. The second sign came 3 days later, wrapped in silk and cruelty. She was trying on a new dress for an upcoming gala. A deep emerald gown, elegant but understated. She liked the way it skimmed her collarbone, the softness of the fabric, the simplicity of it, something that felt like her, not like the mannequin version Victor curated. When he walked into the room, he scanned her from head to toe with clinical efficiency. "It's fine," he said. "Fine?" she echoed. "Fine isn't memorable." He took the hanger from her hand and returned it to the closet. "Wear the silver one. It photographs better." "It's too tight," she protested. "I can barely breathe in it." "That's the point," he said, already walking away. "Beauty requires commitment." Emily stared at the closed closet door long after he left. The emerald dress lay across the bed like a discarded thought. But the third sign, the real fracture, came when the news hit. It started on Twitter. Exposé, Hale Dynamics accused of workplace harassment and forced overtime. Then the New York Times picked it up. Then cable news. Then the protests began. Victor dismissed the entire thing as noise. But Emily saw the tension tightening his shoulders, the clipped tone he used with his assistant, the undercurrent of fury beneath every syllable. He was no longer trying to impress her. He was trying not to shatter. And she was trapped in the blast radius. One evening, she came home from a meeting to find him pacing the penthouse, jaw clenched. "They're coming for me," he snapped. "Idiots! All of them! They don't understand what it takes to build something." She hesitated by the doorway. "Do you want to talk about—" "No," he interrupted sharply. Then, after a beat, more controlled, "No, I need you to stay quiet about this. No statements, no interviews, no posts unless I approve them." Emily felt the air tighten around her. Of course. He stopped pacing long enough to look her in the eye. His gaze was not affectionate, not even familiar. It was ownership. That night she couldn't sleep. The city outside buzzed with life, but the penthouse felt hollow. A glass museum with her trapped inside. She made tea she didn't drink, scanned emails she didn't absorb, opened social media she didn't want to see. A new video had gone viral. She expected more protests, more scandals, but the thumbnail froze her in place, a man kneeling beside a distraught veteran speaking softly. Noah. Her finger hovered, trembling. She clicked. The clip lasted 90 seconds, and every second lodged itself deeper into her chest. Noah's voice was steady, warm, anchored in compassion, a sound she hadn't realized she missed until it washed over her. He talked the younger man through a panic spiral. He held his shoulder when he broke down. He whispered, "You're not alone. Not now. Not ever." Emily covered her mouth, tears blurring the screen. Noah had always been like this, steady, grounded, a quiet strength people leaned toward. She had walked away from it, from him. A notification popped up. ABC Austin. Local Veterans Community Program inspires thousands. The article showed Noah in a simple gray t-shirt, smiling faintly as he adjusted a resistance band for a woman missing part of her leg. He looked changed, older, more carved by hardship, but also more alive than she had seen him in years. And Emily, she'd never felt smaller. Victor entered the room without warning, startling her. "What are you watching?" Nothing," she stammered, locking her phone instinctively. His eyes narrowed. "You're crying." "No, I—" He stepped forward, gripping her chin lightly but firmly. "Emily, look at me." She swallowed. He examined her face like a problem he meant to solve. "Don't embarrass me right now," he said softly. Not kindly, not lovingly, just expectantly. She nodded, throat burning. He released her. "Go fix your makeup," he said. "We're late for dinner." When he left the room, Emily stared at her reflection, a trembling, painted ghost in a mirror framed with gold. A woman she no longer recognized. She sat on the edge of the bed, phone clutched to her chest, breath shaky. Noah was building something real, something good, something meaningful. And she was shrinking. The life she traded love for was revealing itself piece by piece. A cage lined with velvet, locked from the outside. She wiped her tears, stood up, smoothed her dress, but the crack inside her had spread too deep. And for the first time, she wondered how long she could survive living a life built entirely on the wrong choice. The Hale Foundation Gala was the kind of event that made Manhattan glitter. Crystal chandeliers, champagne that cost more than rent, photographers lining the entrance like hunters waiting for movement. The kind of night where people pretended generosity came from the heart, not from the need to polish their reputations. Emily stood in front of the mirror adjusting the silver gown Victor insisted she wear. It clung too tightly, but she no longer bothered arguing. Her face looked perfect, airbrushed, even without a filter. Her eyes, however, betrayed her. She practiced a smile. It didn't reach. Victor brushed past her, fixing his cufflinks. "We're meeting Senator Klein at 8. We need to look united tonight. No wavering. No moods." "Of course," she murmured. He didn't hear the tremor in her voice, or chose not to. In the elevator, he wrapped an arm around her waist. Not affection, more choreography. She stiffened. He noticed. His hand tightened. "Smile, Emily." So she did. It felt like holding her breath. The ballroom overflowed with money disguised as elegance. Golden light washed over marble floors. Waiters moved like choreography, balancing trays of champagne flutes. Conversations rippled, mostly about layoffs, market opportunities, political leverage. Victor greeted everyone with the confidence of a man who assumed rooms would always bend around him. Emily drifted half a step behind, a silent accessory. She scanned the room out of habit and froze. On the far side of the ballroom, near the stage where the keynote speaker would soon take the mic, stood a man she almost didn't recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, but with a faint shadow that made him look older, more grounded. His suit wasn't designer, but it fit him like purpose. His posture was calm, quiet, unforced. Then he turned fully toward her, and Emily's heart slammed once, painfully. Noah. Not the Noah she broke. Not the Noah who collapsed under the weight of her choices. This Noah held himself with a steadiness that made her breath stutter. His eyes scanned the room with that familiar soldier's vigilance, sharp, observant, but softened by something else. Peace. Victor continued talking to a board member, oblivious. Emily couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Noah looked away before seeing her, but she felt the shock of his presence like a hand closing around her ribs. 20 minutes later, the stage lights dimmed, and the host announced the keynote speaker. "Please welcome the founder of the Reeves Veterans Initiative, Sergeant Noah Reeves." Emily's blood turned to ice. Victor's hand on her waist stiffened. "Reeves? Why does that name sound—" He didn't finish. Because Noah stepped onto the stage, and the applause rose like a tide. Emily leaned forward involuntarily, palms pressed to her knees. Noah stood behind the podium, adjusting the microphone with quiet confidence. "Good evening," he began, voice measured, steady. "Most of us in this room know that service doesn't end when deployment ends. Sometimes the hardest battles start after we come home." People murmured, nodding. Emily felt tears burn instantly. He continued, weaving stories of veterans he'd worked with, men and women clawing their way back from trauma, addiction, homelessness. He spoke gently. He spoke honestly. He spoke like someone who had walked through hell and decided to bring others back with him. And when he smiled, soft, restrained, humble, Emily's breath shattered. She remembered that smile. But tonight, it belonged to a man she no longer had permission to recognize. Her chest tightened with a painful, unfamiliar blend of grief and longing. Not for the marriage, not even for the version of him she once had, but for the knowledge that she had broken something precious, and he rebuilt himself into something even stronger without her. When the crowd rose to give Noah a standing ovation, Emily stood too, but only because everyone else did. Her legs trembled, her eyes stung. Victor clapped politely. "Good speaker," he said. "We should consider sponsoring his next event. Good optics." Emily's stomach twisted. Victor didn't hear the humanity in Noah's voice, only the usefulness. She whispered, "Yes, good optics." Her voice felt like glass. Backstage after the speech, staff swarmed around Noah. People congratulated him, asked questions, invited him to interviews, partnerships, initiatives. He thanked everyone with calm sincerity, but his focus stayed grounded, never basking, never grasping, just steady, just Noah. Emily hovered near the side corridor, clutching her clutch bag so tightly her knuckles whitened. She shouldn't approach him. She knew that. But something deep inside, something she'd ignored for years, pushed her forward. When the crowd dispersed, Noah finally saw her. The world seemed to still, just for a breath. His eyes widened slightly, not in longing, not in anger, in recognition. A quiet, startled recognition. "Emily," he said. Her name on his lips broke something inside her. She stepped closer, voice trembling. "Noah, He didn't move toward her. Didn't step back either, just waited. Her heart pounded. She swallowed hard. "You were incredible out there," she whispered. "I'm proud of you." A faint smile touched his lips, gentle, distant, the kind of smile you offer someone who once mattered but no longer shapes your world. "Thank you," he said softly. Emily blinked rapidly, forcing back tears. "Can we talk? Just for a moment?" Noah hesitated, and that hesitation told her everything. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, a moment." And as they stepped into a quiet corner backstage, Emily realized this was the reckoning she'd been running from since the day she left him. Her heart hammered. Her palms trembled. The moment she had dreaded for years had finally arrived. The noise of the gala faded behind them as Noah led Emily into a quiet service hallway. Low lighting, beige walls, and the faint hum of industrial air vents. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't meant for guests. Emily found it fitting. Beautiful places had never been kind to their truth. Noah stood a few feet from her, hands in his pockets, posture steady but guarded. He looked like a man who'd learned the cost of letting people close. Emily clasped her trembling hands. "Thank you for giving me a moment." He nodded. "You said you wanted to talk." She exhaled shakily, rehearsed words falling apart the moment she met his eyes. The eyes she once woke up next to, the eyes she walked away from. "Noah, I don't even know where to begin." "Just start," he said quietly. "I'm listening." His gentleness made it worse. Her throat tightened. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The words trembled out of her like a confession. "I'm so sorry for leaving the way I did, for hurting you, for all of it." Noah didn't flinch, didn't soften, didn't harden either. He simply absorbed the words like someone who had already carried them for a long time. Emily forced herself to keep going. The truth is, I was scared. He looked at her then, just slightly. She felt the shift, a small opening, a small wound. I know that doesn't excuse anything, she continued, but it's the truth. The deployments, the distance, the constant uncertainty, it felt like I was unraveling every day. And then Victor came along with his promises and his stability and... Her voice cracked. I let myself believe that meant safety. Noah exhaled slowly, not angry, not disbelieving, just understanding in a way that made her chest ache. You were overwhelmed, he said quietly. I saw that. I just didn't realize how bad it had gotten. Emily covered her face for a moment. I didn't realize it either, or I didn't want to. A silence stretched between them, not hostile, but heavy. Old memories flickered in its shadows. Noah, she whispered, lowering her hands, I need you to know something. He waited. When I left, I thought I was choosing a better life. But that life, she swallowed, it hasn't made me happy, not even for a moment. A faint crease appeared between Noah's brows, but his voice stayed steady. Emily, I'm sorry your life isn't what you hoped for, truly, but that doesn't change what happened. She blinked. I know. I'm not saying it to punish you, he added. Just, we have to be honest. We're not those people anymore. The words sliced with calm precision, but they were true. Emily stepped closer, not touching him. She didn't dare, but enough to feel the distance between who they were and who they had become. You look so strong tonight, she murmured, so sure of yourself. I barely recognized you. I barely recognize myself sometimes, he admitted. His honesty made her chest tighten painfully, but in a good way. You've built something meaningful, something real. It's not just me, he said. It's the people who show up, people who trust me, people I don't want to fail. Do you ever... Emily hesitated, the question fragile. Do you ever think about us? Noah's jaw tightened, not with anger, but with the weight of a choice he'd made long ago. Sometimes, he said, when a memory shows up out of nowhere, when I remember a version of myself who thought love meant holding on no matter what. Her breath hitched. And now? Now? He looked her in the eyes, steady and warm and utterly unreachable. Now I know love also means letting go. Emily felt tears building. I don't expect you to forgive me. I forgave you a long time ago, he said gently. The words stunned her. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. Why? Because I couldn't move forward while dragging that pain behind me, Noah said. Forgiving you wasn't for you. It was for me. Her tears fell harder. Not dramatic, not loud, just quiet streaks of regret down carefully powdered cheeks. Noah. She stepped closer, still not touching, but her voice broke with the ache of everything she'd ruined. I wish I had been someone stronger, someone who stayed. Noah's expression softened, not into longing, but into something far more devastating, compassion. You were who you were, he said, and I was who I was. And now? She whispered. He inhaled, slow and steady. Now we're two different people walking two different paths. You leaving broke me, but rebuilding changed me, and I can't go back to who I was. The words sank into her like stones. Is there any chance? The question escaped her before she could stop it, a whisper made of hope and desperation. Noah shook his head gently. I'm not the man you left, and you're not the woman I married. A sob slipped from Emily's lips, small, stifled, raw. He stepped closer, not to embrace her, not to pull her in, but to place a hand briefly, gently on her shoulder. I truly wish you find peace, Emily, he said softly. But whatever we were, it's finished. His hand fell away. Emily closed her eyes as tears slipped down her cheeks unchecked. Not pleading, not bargaining, just mourning. She had come tonight hoping to reclaim a piece of the past. Instead, she discovered the truth. Noah hadn't moved on. He had risen beyond, and she was still buried in the choices she made. When she opened her eyes, he was already taking a step back, not out of cruelty, but closure. Goodbye, Emily, he said. Her voice barely found air. Goodbye, Noah. As he walked away, his silhouette grew smaller in the dim hallway, and Emily realized the tears falling down her face weren't just about losing him. They were about losing who she could have been. Emily left the service hallway with blurred vision, the echo of Noah's final goodbye following her like a shadow she couldn't shake. The ballroom's music felt louder now, its glitter harsher, its people colder. Everything was too bright and too sharp, as if the world had tilted out of place and refused to right itself. Victor found her near the entrance, adjusting his tie in a mirror. There you are, he said, irritated. You disappeared in the middle of the donor round. She swallowed, steadying her breath. I needed a moment. He didn't bother hiding his annoyance. You can have a moment later. We're leaving. Emily nodded automatically and followed him out of the ballroom, but inside a quiet breaking had already begun. They rode home in silence. Victor scrolled through emails, oblivious to the tear tracks drying on her face. Emily stared out the window, watching Manhattan blur. Bright lights softened by the fog of her senses, skyscrapers resembling prison bars. When they entered the penthouse, Victor finally looked at her. You embarrassed me tonight. Her head snapped toward him. How? You were distant, emotional. It was noticeable. His tone was flat, cutting. Whatever personal issues you have, you need to get control of them. For the first time in months, Emily didn't bow her head or apologize. Something inside her, fragile but fierce, refused. I'm not okay, she said quietly. Victor blinked, surprised by the directness. You're fine. You're stressed. Take a pill if you need one. No. Her voice was soft, but it held shape. No, he repeated, amusement flickering into irritation. Emily, I don't have time for... I'm not fine, she said again, and I'm not staying. The room froze. Victor's posture sharpened. What did you say? I'm leaving. His laugh was a quiet, dangerous thing. And go where? I don't know, she said, but not here, not with you. He took a step closer. Not violent, not loud, just threatening in that subtle corporate way wealthy men mastered. You're being dramatic. You think walking out fixes anything? You'll come crawling back within a week. She met his eyes, and for once, she wasn't the trembling woman who shaped excuses around her fear. No, Victor, she whispered, I won't. For a tense moment, they stared at each other. Two people who'd once mistaken control for affection and compliance for compatibility. Victor finally exhaled, disgusted. Do whatever you want. He walked into his office and shut the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Emily didn't bother packing much. A few clothes, documents, a small box of jewelry, none of the pieces Victor gave her. She paused at the doorway, instinctively waiting for permission, then realized she didn't need it. Not anymore. She walked out and didn't look back. Her new apartment was a studio in Queens, small, slightly drafty, with peeling paint and a view of a laundromat. But it was hers, her choice, her consequence, her beginning. She got a lower-paying job at a mid-sized marketing agency. Fewer fancy clients, fewer rooftop galas, fewer curated illusions. More work. More people who said please and thank you. She found she liked it. The honesty, the normalcy, the absence of gold-plated cages. But healing wasn't instant. Some nights she sat on her thrifted couch, staring at old text drafts she never sent. Some mornings she woke with a pain that felt like homesickness for a home she'd burned down herself. She didn't chase the pain away. She let it stay. Let it teach her. Over time, the ache eased, not because she forgot, but because she grew around it. 3 months later, a coworker forwarded her an article. Reeves Veterans Initiative expands to fifth location in Texas. Below the headline was a photo. Noah standing beside a woman. Tall, warm-eyed, radiant in a way that didn't require diamonds or curated poses. His fiancée, according to the caption. Emily stared at the picture for a long moment. Not with jealousy. Not even with longing. Just a deep, quiet ache mixed with a tender, almost painful joy. He looked loved. He looked steady. He looked whole. She closed the article gently, almost reverently, and pressed the phone to her chest. "Good," she whispered. "You deserve this." That weekend, Emily took the subway to a community center in Brooklyn. She'd heard they were hosting free veteran wellness sessions, modeled after Noah's program. She stood in the back, anonymous among volunteers, handing out water bottles, helping adjust mats, cleaning equipment. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't explain her connection. This wasn't about him. Not anymore. It was about doing something that mattered, about giving instead of taking, about unlearning the woman she had become, about building, slowly, imperfectly, the woman she wanted to be. In a moment of stillness, she found herself smiling softly. A real smile. Small. Frail, but true. Tears stung her eyes, not the sharp, desperate kind from before, but the kind that marked acceptance. Forgiveness. She wiped them gently and whispered to no one in particular, "I'm not crying because I lost him. I'm crying because he found himself, and I'm finally finding me." The world outside was still loud, messy, unforgiving, but inside Emily, for the first time in years, there was peace.